Hey, this is Brian with ActiveMelody.com. For this week's guitar lesson, we have an awesome little percussive rhythmic fingerstyle composition. It's got a lot of blues licks, and this is a great way to get into fingerstyle. If you've never tried fingerstyle, this would be the lesson for you. And if you are a fingerstyle player, you're going to love this too. I'll show you a technique with your right hand where you're using your thumb to play the bass notes on the 1 and the 3, and then you're slapping on the 2 and the 4 to create this really cool rhythm. It sounds difficult, but I'm telling you, it's pretty easy to follow along. So I've got the lesson split into 2 parts. In this video, we're going to learn the first half. If you'd like to watch the second half and download the tablature for this, and also get access to the on-screen tab viewer, you can get those things by going to ActiveMelody.com, go to the weekly lessons page, and do a search for EP332. All right, so it's very easy to start to split up guitar players into groups, to put them into segments. Some people are rock players or jazz players or blues or classical, all these different styles. But one of the big divisions that happens for guitar players is fingerstyle players. That means people that play with their fingers with their right hand. They don't use a pick. And then non-fingerstyle players are people that do use a pick. And one of the things that I've noticed about a lot of people that do play with a pick is they don't want to touch a fingerstyle composition. It's just not their thing. And I was that way in the beginning. I felt so clumsy with my right hand, I didn't even want to go there. But there are times when it's super important to be able to do that because it gives you a whole different dynamic. And this is one of those times. This lesson, we're going to be looking at a rhythmic fingerstyle or a percussive fingerstyle where you're actually kind of keeping a rhythm or like a drum beat going with your right hand while you're picking out the melody. And this is not difficult. I'm going to give you a little tip here that's going to show you how to do this with the right hand. We're going to start off this lesson this way. And then what's cool about this is beyond this composition, which is a lot of fun to play, you'll be able to use this technique over any chord changes. So here's the first thing we're going to do. Before we start doing anything with the left hand, we're going to play with the right hand. We're going to do a slap on the 2 and the 4. So if I'm counting this out, I'm going to count it like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And just start off doing that, just to get a little bit of a groove going. You can tap your foot if that helps, on the other beats, but the 2 and the 4, we're going to slap. Now I want you to keep that in your mind and listen to me play a little bit of this. 3, 4, 1, 2. You can hear my hand coming down harder on the 2 and the 4. So that's the first thing we're going to do. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to use our thumb, which is your bass player. Remember, when you're a fingerstyle player, your thumb hits the bass notes. And we're going to hit just the E string, that bottom 6th string, on the 1 and the 3. So we're going to do 1, slap, 3, slap. So the slaps are on the 2 and the 4. The thumb, or the bass note, is on the 1 and the 3. So it sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And what that's doing is it's starting to get a rhythm in your head. And that's the rhythm we're going to be using basically throughout this whole composition. If you can do that, 1, 2, 3, 4, you can follow along and do the rest of this. Now we're going to throw a melody line on top of that, but it's not as difficult as it may seem. Okay, so that's the setup, and that's the premise that we're working in. So the first thing that happens in this, and by the way, this song is played in the key of E, and it's really just 3 chords. It's an E chord, an A chord, and a B7 chord, the 1, the 4, and the 5 chord. Now there's some creative ways that we're getting around those chords, but that's the guts of this whole thing is a E, A, and B. So it starts off with, now this would be a pickup note. So if we're counting this out, it would go 1, 2. So that would actually technically come in on the and of 2. So it's 1 and 2 and. So let me show you that first. We're going to use our middle finger on the open B string, or the 2nd string. And then we're going to play the 2nd fret 2nd string. And I use my ring finger to pluck the 1 string, or the open E string. Now some people might use their middle finger. This is where you get into all these other facets of fingerstyle. Some people play with just 3 fingers. Some people play with just 2, like Merle Travis. But I tend to use all 4, and that's just how I learned it. So we have those 3 notes. And remember, it comes in on the and of 2. 1 and 2 and. Then there's a slap. And then we come right in with the E chord. Now I'm playing the E chord right here using the D chord shape. This is out of the Cage system. But if you play a D chord and you slide it up 2 frets and you pluck, with these 3 fingers, you pluck the top 3 strings, that's an E chord. Now we're going to throw in the bass note after that, which would be your open 6th string. So all together from the beginning we have. So I don't want you to go any further until you can do that. Just get that down. With the slap. Now remember, this, your bass note, is defining the 1. So remember we started that. The 1 and the 3 happens with our bass note. So when I hit my thumb on that string, that sets up the 1 of the next measure. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Right there on the 1. So that's the next thing that happens. A slap, and then we're going to bar the first 3 strings in the 4th fret. Play that, plucking that with these 3 fingers again, and then the open 6th string again. And then I come up to the 7th fret with my pinky and hit that 1st string. And then there's a slap after that. And it seems crazy right now. Some of you are probably writing this down like, wait, thumb, slap, 1, 3. It gets confusing. If you have the tablature, if you're a premium member, you have the tablature. And that would be probably the best way to go through this. Now, I'm just going to demonstrate all the technique stuff in this video, but you'll be able to follow along very precisely with that tablature. Now after that, there's that slap, and then I'm going to come down and play my middle finger on the 3rd fret 2nd string, ring finger on the 4th fret 3rd string, but then I'm also going to play the open 1 string, and then thumb comes down after that, and then my index finger goes down on the 2nd fret 1st string. So backing up, you can already start to feel a groove happening. See, there's a slap after that. So the next thing that happens goes like this. Now notice that. So it starts with the thumb on the 6th string. We do a hammer on there, playing that same chord shape, 2nd fret 1st string. But then I use the back of my fingernails to come down on the first 3 strings. So that's where I was slapping. But I wanted those notes to ring out at the same time. So what you do in those cases, where do you do a slap or do you play the chord? You kind of do both. You're always accenting that 2 and the 4 though. So by hitting the notes with the back of my fingernail, I get that same kind of percussive sound. So let's back it up from the beginning. So we have 1 and 2. And then we go to the 4 chord and I go. Now what I'm doing for that is I'm borrowing the first 4 strings on the 2nd fret. I'm playing with my thumb on the 5th string now. So now we're playing over the A chord. So thumb goes from the E string to the A string. And then these 3 fingers, middle, index, and ring, are going to play strings 2, 3, and 4 at the same time that your thumb hits the 5th string. And what I do is I play all 4 of those strings at the same time. And when that happens, I do a hammer-on with my middle finger to the 3rd fret 2nd string and my ring finger to the 4th fret 4th string. And then I take that off and play the A chord. So what that is, that's just a D chord. In this one case, I did the 4 chord of the 4 chord. So I'm playing a D and then going to the A. And that's a technique that I learned from Keith Richards. He uses that a lot. Going back and forth between whatever chord he's on and then the 4 chord of that chord. So you can always keep that in mind as a little tip to enhance your playing. If you're playing rhythm, writing something, whatever chord you're on, if you're making the chord with that bar, you can go to the 4 and then back to that chord. It's a really cool effect. So that's what I did. There's the slap, 2, 3, and 4, and then the bass on the 5th string. I put my pinky down on the 4th fret 1st string, did a slap, and then took my pinky off and played the 2nd fret 1st string. So I kept that bar down the whole time. And then I hit the bass note to follow that up, that open 5th string. So that's a lot of information. Let's back up from the beginning and play us up to that point. 1 and 2. So now the song goes back to the 1 chord, which is your E chord. So to get from that A back to the E, I went. And to play that, I'm going to play the open 1 string with my ring finger. And then I've got my index finger down on the 5th fret 2nd string and my middle finger on the 6th fret 3rd string. These 2 notes. But I'm also playing the open 1 string with that. So I go like this. Now, some of you are going, what is that? Why those notes? Well, remember, we're still playing over the 4 chord. We're trying to get back to the 1 chord. So I was just thinking about the 4 chord, which is your A chord. You have your A chord here. You have an A chord up here. So if we look at this A chord, which is just your bar chord on the 5th fret, and I only played strings 2 and 3. That's what I was doing. So the more you can visualize these chord shapes, you'll see how you can start pulling little notes out of them and working those notes into your playing. And that's really all it is. You become much better improviser when you know how to do that. And it's not that difficult. You can do this. This is not the kind of thing that is only reserved for like master musicians. It's really for people that are just clever about pulling out what they need out of chord shapes. That's what all your best players do. So we have that. I'm going to slide down and bar the first 4 strings again on the 2nd fret, which is your A chord. We're going to play strings 2, 3, and 4. So you have, and then we're back to the 1 chord. So when we come back to that E chord, get into this groove that goes. Man, there's so much mileage you can get out of this groove. Let me show you how to do it. It's not that hard. So this. Now look at what I'm doing with my left hand. I'm just holding down an E chord. I've got my middle finger, ring finger, and index finger playing strings 2, 3, and 4 out of that E chord. And then I've got my thumb playing the 6th string, or the bass note, that open E. So we start with those 4 strings. A slap, then I come back to the bass note and play strings 2, 3, and 4 again. But now I'm going to put my pinky down on the 2nd fret 2nd string. So you have another slap, and then we're going to play strings 1 and 2, or the 1 string. It really doesn't matter. Or you could do 1, 2, and 3. So you go. And then after that, you're going to go back to your bass note and another slap. And I love playing over this part so much because it's taking something so basic, which is just an E chord, and it's creating a rhythm out of that. try that over and over again until you can start to get it, and you start to feel like Ry Cooder when you're doing that. That's the kind of stuff that I think of when I think of him. Just simple chord shapes, but really cool grooves. And I'm telling you, once you get that right hand going, it's really not that difficult. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, I'm a fingerstyle player. And I know some of you already are, but I'm saying for those of us that are pick players, I put myself in that category as well. I'm more of a pick player than a fingerstyle player. Okay, let's back up from the beginning. We have 1 and 2. Now after that, we go to the 5 chord, which is your B chord, and to play that I went. So there's that B7 chord. Now there's another interesting twist to this when we get to the 5 chord. I'll call this out as we get into it. But I'm doing this half bend here on the 2nd fret, 2nd string. So I'm using my middle finger for that, and that's harder to do depending on the gauge of string you have, just because you're bending so close to the nut and the tension is so high right there. But you can do it. Just give it a half bend. Remember, it's not a full bend, it's just a half. You're just trying to hit the note that's 1 fret higher than where you start. You do a bend, and then a bend and release. And then you play that open B string. Now while that note rings out, let your middle finger come down to the 2nd fret, and it's important that you use your middle finger for this. 2nd fret, 5th string, to hit that low B note, because we're going to let our other fingers make the rest of that B7 chord. So you have... So you can see that after I put down my middle finger on that 2nd fret, 5th string, I put my ring finger and index finger down on strings 3 and 4. Index finger goes down on the 1st fret, ring finger goes down on the 2nd fret, and now I'm making that B7 chord. So that's why I said it's important to hit that bass note with your middle finger so that the other fingers can make the rest of that chord. Now what I'm doing for our rhythm here, I'm doing the same slaps and everything in the same place, and the same bass notes in the same place from a timing perspective, but notice this. In this one case here, over the 5 chord, I'm going from the 5th string to the 6th string, and then back to the 5th string. I tried to not do that because I thought, well, you know, I'm just going to keep it simple so that everything's very consistent. So we could just stay on the 5 string. You go, but it just sounded boring. And just moving that one finger there, I thought that'd be just enough challenge for a lot of you to start thinking about that style of playing, which is more of a Chet Atkins style, where you're doing the bass line just like a bass player would. So I figured in this one case you can suck it up and do that, and that way it's not overwhelming. It's just in one little instance. But that's what's going on there. And again, if you're a premium member, I've got all the specific notes of the tab. I don't want to belabor these points, but that's what's going on for that 5 chord. Now we go back at this point, back to the 1 chord, and I could have went back into that part, but I thought, let's blues it up a little bit. So after that 5 chord, we go into this real bluesy thing. I love this. So I start with the open 1 string, and then I slide in. I'm playing strings 1, 2, and 3 with those same 3 fingers, but I've got my middle finger on the 4th fret, 3rd string, and I've got my index finger on the 3rd fret, 2nd string. So you have, and that's just pattern 2 of the minor pentatonic scale for E, if you're wondering where that is. But I'm throwing in that open 1 string. And then I come down and play the A chords, play strings 2, 3, and 4 again, with the same fingers. And then we do a hammer-on into our E chord. So it's just an E chord, but you're hammering on with your index finger to that 1st fret, 3rd string. Now that's something that I do all the time. You're probably sick of hearing me talk about that, but anytime I want to blues something up and I've got an E chord, or not even just an E chord, but an E chord shape. So you can do it over G. So you got to think in terms of, you know, other positions. Don't just link something to one chord. But it just makes it sound much more bluesy to do it. So All right, so after, then I just go right into an E7 chord. And these three fingers, again, they're just playing strings 2, 3, and 4. I'm playing a little triad there, a little harmony. So I've got the E chord, I put my pinky down on the 2nd fret 2nd string, and then I slide it up to the 3rd fret 2nd string, which turns that into an E7 chord. So you have okay, now we're going to go to the 4 chord. Isn't that a cool way of doing that? And that's just a little bass fill lick. But I thought that fit perfectly there. So to play that, I'm just going to bar the first 4 strings again on the 2nd fret. So I'm ready to play my A chord. I'm going to do my index finger on the 4th string, pull that up. And so while I keep that bar there, I do a hammer-on between the 3rd fret and the 4th fret on the 5th string. I come back, and so I'm using my thumb for that hammer-on. Go back to my index finger on the 4th string, and then I come up here with my ring finger to the 4th fret 4th string, and then I pluck the 3rd string with my middle finger. But you can see I kept that bar down the whole time for the A shape. And then we're back down to that open 5th string, and I play the 4 chord back to the 1 chord, that Keith Richards thing again, the D chord back to the A chord. So you have, and you can see that I go back from the A chord to that D chord and back to the A chord, that 1 chord to the 4 chord and back to the 1 chord, that Keith Richards move. Now, one of the things you might have just noticed about the bass note, if you were really paying attention, is that I played it in this case on the 1 and the and of 2. So remember in the beginning I said we're going to do it on the 1, 2, 3, 4, on the 1 and the 3. But it's okay just to give a little bit of a hiccup, and almost like a shuffle. So this is what it would sound like. It'd be 1 and 2 and. So you can see it just came in a little bit ahead there. And I do that in a few spots. I didn't want to mention that at the beginning just because I thought that would be confusing. But that's what's going on. So it's okay to come in on the 3. It's also okay to come in on the and of 2. Just if you want to create a little bit of a hesitation or a little bit of a shuffle. It'd be the same thing if you were playing drums. You're not always going to be doing the kick on the 1 and the 3 and the snare on the 2 and the 4. You might throw in a little fill here and there, and that's kind of what's going on. It's like a little fill that you're doing with your chord. Now at this point we go back to the 1 chord, which is your E chord, and I'm played. Again, it's got a little bit of a bluesy feel. So this lick here is played with it's played between the 1 and the 3 string. So I've got my ring fingers playing that open 1 string, and my index finger is playing the 3rd string. It starts on the 1st fret, and then I go up to the 2nd fret, and then I come up to the 4th fret, all on the 3rd string. And then my bass note happens on the open 6th string. There's a slap there before that. Go back to that E chord. So let me do that slowly. We have, there's your A chord. So that's just barring the first 4 strings in the 2nd fret. Then we go back to the bass note and then build that E chord by doing the hammer on that I'm always talking about. So you have, and then we go back to the 5 chord. So that's your B7 chord. And what I did for that is you already know how to make the chord here. And so I take these 3 fingers and I play strings 2, 3, and 4. And then the thumb comes down after that on the 5th string. And then we do this little walk down. And this is a great walk down. It's a great way to end a song. It's a great turnaround you can work in a song. It's just an awesome little blues thing. Again, this is the same strings 1 and 3. We're going to start by using our middle finger to slide from the 2nd fret up to the 4th fret on the 3rd string. And then I put my ring finger down on the 4th fret 1st string. And then we're going to play strings 1 and 3 together, but we're going to slide these 2 fingers down a fret, slide it down again, and then back down to here. Now that's just your E chord, strings 1 and 3. But I've got my index finger down on the 1st fret, 3rd string. So, and then my thumb comes down for the bass note there. Now, don't just take this lick and think about this as being something for this composition. Now, explore this. I want you to take that strings 1 and 3 and do it fingerstyle. Go forward, go backward with it, and start to learn how that sounds. Get comfortable with the way that sounds. Once you're able to do that, you can do that, transpose it into an any key. So if you wanted to do it for G now, you can see there's my E chord right there. When I played a G chord using the bar chord shape, these 3 fingers are just playing the same E chord. So all these licks that you're learning like that, you can transpose them, right? Based on the chord that you're playing. So just link it back to your chord shape. That's why playing off of chord shapes is so important. Once you learn it in one place, now you can do it in any chord, any key, all over the neck. That's probably the best place to stop. There's a lot of information, I realize, in this composition. I hope you don't just look at it as a composition to just learn and memorize and then eventually forget, which is what we all do. I want you to think about this as a whole series of little mini lessons. You've got the percussive fingerstyle thing, you've got licks that you're learning, and you've got a technique now that you can apply to other things. So the next challenge, once you're able to play this at a comfortable tempo, is to take another song that you do, in any chords, and take the same concept and play it over other chords. And then you'll start to realize, oh, you're a fingerstyle player and you can write compositions like this. It's not that difficult. So we're going to go back from the beginning, and I'm going to play all of this first half. And then if you're a premium member, you can join me in part 2, where we'll go over the second half. And you'll also have access to the tablature and the on-screen tab viewer, which you can slow down and loop and all of that stuff. And if you're not a premium member yet, come join us. It's very affordable. Lots of great lessons. You have access to the entire catalog. All right, here we go from the beginning. 1 and 2.